Once upon a time there was an enchanted brightly colored magic tower in a very faraway place. The main character also possessed a very secret C-rank magic ability. This guy had the ability to connect with the society of the dead. One day this guy went on his magical assignment around a very scary terrain. All was dark, sometimes shining brightly and strongly. The guy decided to use his magical defense. This character was called Jacob. On another mission he was upset that he had to destroy everyone again. He recalled the moments of his battles as he lay exhausted after a hard fight and dreamed of having all his strength restored to him by a higher rank. One day Jacob went to a restaurant with a beautiful lady. The girl started to say something incomprehensible that night, which the guy didn't like very much. The guy got up abruptly from the table and started to resent me. He said, "Let's go home." The girl abruptly stopped the guy by the arm and said that they needed to have a serious talk. He needed to listen to her. The guy did not expect such a serious reaction from the girl. He decided to ask me directly, asked me sharply what was wrong. Was it something important? His companion said with serious words, "You may not believe me, of course, but soon there will be a tower of trials on earth. This magical tower, this is not an easy tower, this is a tower of spirits." The guy was very angry with this information. He thought that the girl did not believe in him. The girl did not expect such a turn of events from the guy, because he behaved quite inadequately. This girl's name was Vera. She named 3 important rules to overcome the Tower of Trials. The guy didn't expect to hear 3 such hard and important rules at all. Vera noticed that the guy was worried, so she again repeated the 3 most important rules for him to overcome the Tower of Magic. The girl also told the guy that it will be very difficult. This tower contains very difficult tests. Vera said a very important cardinal rule, that when he awakens his ability, he must, and even must have a weapon with him. Jacob was alarmed by this rule, as he realized that everyone around him would be magically capable, and the task might be beyond him, which made him very angry. Faith asks Jacob to name all 3 of the rules she just told him. The boy does it with ease. Around the girl and the guy appeared a huge magical force, which developed into a projection screen and the further path of the warrior. Jacob was angry because he thought the girl was joking, but he actually saw it with his own eyes. She was angry that Jacob wasn't listening to her, so she told him and reminded him of the 3 cardinal rules, and then said she wouldn't tell him anything else. 3 major things that could save this protagonist's life. Jacob's been thinking about this situation as much as possible. At one point, the girl just disappeared in the world of magic, and the guy was left all alone, not knowing how to live and generally move on. Jacob continued to sit and contemplate his existence, and then he was suddenly in the world of magic, and he finally realized that this was the task with the towers of powerful mages. Looking around in the world of magic, guy found that he was surrounded by weapons. He remembered the words of the girl and began to choose an object of defense. The guy was very attracted to the huge magic spear, and he looked at it very happily. When he took this spear in his hand, he felt an incredible surge of energy and magic power. Then on the wall Jacob saw a huge sword. It caught his attention. Then the guy took the sword in his hands and realized that this would be his final choice of weapon. The boy realized that with such a strong, huge magic sword he could defeat any enemy. Any enemy he could defeat. Little by little he began to realize that he had a huge challenge ahead of him, which he had to pass. After a while, the guy started teleporting between dimensions and he couldn't realize in which dimension he was now and whether he was alive at this time. Finding himself in a scary and strange magical place, the guy waved his sword to keep himself safe. In order to protect himself, the guy continued to defend himself with his magical huge sword that was in his hands, very carefully, because every rustle tensed him. In an instant, the guy felt an incredible magical power. He began to be pulled by an invisible being. Jacob was just confused. He didn't understand what was happening to him, because he really didn't know what to do, and at one point a scary goblin came flying out. Unexpectedly, Jacob finds himself in a crucial battle. This battle will decide who wins, Goblin or Jacob. A terrifying huge green zombie with a spear stood and looked at the guy. He was very angry. He was screaming and opening his mouth. The goblin was waving his weapon in front of the boy. But Jacob was already alert, already clutching his weapon tightly in his hand. Suddenly Jacob started to attack the scary goblin. He jumped up sharply and made his secret strike. He used his weapon called a crossbow. Then the guy pulled out his huge sword and swung at the fearsome goblin. He struck hard and then knocked out the character. Then the guy came to his senses and he just realized what he had done. Watching and remembering the situation, he realized that he had destroyed one of the goblins. The boy noticed a very interesting blade on the goblin in question. He carefully wanted to examine it as he suddenly felt a very strong force and spinning in his head. The guy was very sick. He was lying on the ground and looking at this blade. At one point, this blade lit up with a glowing light. Well, the guy was so bad that he just kept lying on the ground. After a few minutes, the boy screams sharply and gets off the ground. He regains consciousness. Jacob ponders the situation and can't figure out what's been happening to him lately. No one can explain these unusual events. The guy decides to stock up on weapons and continues to move on. Jacob held his enormous sword in front of him, moving forward with his sword in front of him and keeping his gaze fixed on it. At one point, his sword lit up with an incredible light. In an instant, the guy feels himself with the incredible power of a huge sword blade that he held in his hands in front of him. Jacob saw a hologram of how he was an incredible fighter, the strongest and most successful among the battles. There was a sudden noise and the guy heard it and turned around. He saw a few new goblins behind him. Seeing such a picture, the guy takes out his crossbow and starts loading it and aiming it at the goblins. Suddenly the goblins became very angry and red-eyed, and they wanted to attack him. But Jacob pulled out his magic blade and kept the fight to the last, which pissed off the goblins. This guy was clearly confident. He held a magical sword in front of him, and he also knew that he would definitely win. There was an incredible magical aura around him. Both goblins were very angry. They kept attacking the guy along with their weapons in their hands. They were also shouting loudly and their weapons were very sharp. Jacob confidently fought back the evil goblins with a strong blow of his sword and cut one of the two. The goblin girl was very surprised by this turn of events. She got very angry and started attacking the guy violently. She jumped on top of him screaming and trying to bite or destroy him with her weapon. Jacob had expected such a turn of events, so he was ready for it, and he attacked the goblin with a sharp sword thrust and destroyed it completely. Then after a moment he realized what had happened to him again. After a moment, the guy saw a green aura around him and the ball. It was some incredible superpower, and then a tunnel appeared in front of the guy. What he saw made him laugh as a small crying goblin came out of the cave. This little goblin was very angry and upset at the same time, and when the guy pulled out his huge sword, he got scared and cowered in a corner near the wall. Jacob was very surprised at the situation. He continued to watch the little goblin's behavior carefully. At first glance, this little creature seemed very cute and scared, but in fact it was clearly up to something. At one point it was screaming at the guy not to destroy it because he was really scared. The creature screamed like a small child and was very frightened. The creature continued to look scared, but the guy realized that it was very afraid of his sword, so he continued to taunt it. The little goblin begged for the guy to trust him. He kept looking at the boy with his big, sweet eyes. Meanwhile, the girl who was Jacob's companion was also in a very difficult situation. The girl was also surrounded by evil goblins. She was hiding fearfully behind large rocks. When Faith had accumulated enough mana, she used her fire superpower against the evil goblins. The little goblin had a caustic look in his eyes. He kept yelling and acting really bad. Thinking a bit, the guy decided how to fix the problem to trust the goblin. Seeing a rope behind him, he decides to tie his hands. The little creature didn't like it very much and started yelling why he was so distrustful of him, to which the guy just ignored him. The little goblin continued to scream very loudly. He also complained that the guy had tied his hands very tightly, Jacob was very close to the little goblin. He was very pleased with himself. In an instant, he saw a magical talisman around the goblin's neck. And with a sudden movement of his hand, he wanted to tear it off. Clutching this secret magical talisman, the boy thought that he could gain thanks to it. But the little goblin was very upset by such a find. And with his pitiful gaze, he continued to stare. Jacob realized that this magical talisman could make him very strong, maybe even immortal. With a slight movement of his hand, he swapped the little zombie right for the talisman. And then suddenly he changed his mind. Jacob decides to follow along with the little goblin and not do anything to him yet. One step at a time, they move forward little by little. The little goblin was very grateful to the guy for letting him live and not ripping off his medallion. Jack just stroked the little goblin's head. The guy along with the little goblin continued to follow the cave further and further. The little goblin was very scared, but at one point he felt another surge of superpowers. A magical immense external power was around the guy. It surrounded literally everything from the path to the guy's weapon. The little goblin was surprised by the guy's abilities. Jacob was very happy with himself and his superpower and decided to keep going. But at one point the guy got very sick and felt as lousy as possible. The little goblin saw that the place they were following was already right in front of them. But the boy wasn't quite there yet. The ornate gateway to the other world was glowing very brightly. Also in front of the gate was a huge black abyss. The huge gate was also under a huge lock and chain. Jacob finally felt his condition improve, and holding his huge magical sword in front of him, he decided to act. When he found himself right in front of the huge gate to the other world, he looked at the little goblin, and for some reason he was very unhappy. Jacob couldn't stand it any longer, thinking about how to open the door. The guy decides to try to use his magic power and starts reaching for the door with his hand, and in an instant his hand starts glowing with an incredible green bright light. With magic and superpowers, the doors light up brightly and then the castle starts to disappear right before your eyes. The barrier that was in front of the guy and the little goblin no longer existed, and they were inside another world. Everything around them was burning hot fire. There were a lot of scary goblins in this place, and in addition to them there were huge iron hell knights. And they were obviously not happy about the new guests in their world. The little goblin started shouting loudly, thus attracting attention. The guy realized that it must be a setup and started pulling out his weapon and attacking. He started attacking the evil goblins with sharp and quick movements. He was as focused and determined as possible, and as his confidence was off the charts. The guy easily smashed every goblin in his path. He felt an incredible burst of energy and destroyed one by one. J-Pom also used his speed and agility to destroy the goblins before they even thought of attacking. The guy dealt with each of his opponents very skillfully. It was even noticeable that he enjoyed it very much. He felt his power and superiority over his opponent. Jacob grinned his full smile, his emotions overflowing, and he felt that he could easily destroy anyone in his way. The goblins were not happy about the boy's strength, for they could do nothing to him. On a huge motivation, the guy attacked every goblin in his path, the strong strokes of his sword leading him to actively destroy the evil creatures. Of course, these creatures were in their own world, so their numbers were very large. The little goblin watched from the side as the guy destroyed each. The Iron Knights of Hell were also watching this confrontation. One of the goblins wanted to attack the guy unexpectedly and sneaked up on him from behind to destroy him for good. But Jacob sensed with his superpowers that he was in danger. He turned around and continued to deliver powerful professional blows to the warrior of light. This guy was clearly ready to destroy everyone forever. After fighting with a bunch of goblins, he stopped to rest a bit, as his energy was strong, but unfortunately not eternal. The guy looked up and found that the evil huge Iron Knight was already very close, and he was clearly determined to destroy him forever. Taking up his magic sword, Jacob gathered his strength and decided to confront the Iron Knight. Pointing his sword in front of him, he began to approach his opponent. The huge Iron Evil Knight was not simple, but was also endowed with magic. Only evil magic, the magic of hell. His eyes shone with a bright blue light. Jacob took his fighting stance and was ready to attack. In an instant, the most powerful and massive battle of hell begins. Power and magic reigned around this battle. The guy was very angry. He tried to focus on his opponent as much as possible, and then attacked sharply and harshly. At the right moment, Jacob attacks the Iron Knight with a sharp dash and strikes with his sword. Unfortunately, the Iron Knight manages to put his shield under his sword and the irreparable happens. The strongest huge magical sword of the guy breaks right against the shield of the enemy. The little goblin was just shocked by this turn of events and shouted very strongly that no, not this. The huge evil knight was beginning to realize that the guy's weapon was broken. His eyes were shining brightly. Jacob was very surprised that his sword was broken. He looked at his broken weapon and was shocked by the situation. The Iron Knight started throwing a lot of blows at the guy. He didn't expect to be left without his main weapon. Weapons are the main attribute of a true magical warrior. Without thinking, the boy remembered the blade on his belt. He sharply grabbed his magic blade and an incredible power lurked around him. The guy glowed and shone with a bright light. He was ready to fight already. The knight continued his attack. This iron huge man made the strongest blows. But our protagonist also gave him the strongest rebuff. The magical power was overwhelming the guy. With one sharp movement, Jacob jumped up and made a stiff attack on the knight. Unexpectedly, the knight did a magic trick and used his super magical mega shield. Jacob flew a few meters away from such a strong defense. The knight felt power over the boy. The eyes of the knight continued to so incredibly, but the guy was not afraid of it. He held very firm. At one point the knight used his sword. He slammed his sword hard into the floor. The strongest heavenly knight applied the maximum damage power. This knight was the strongest among the first level. It was the strongest battle between our protagonist and a level 1 knight. The guy felt superiority over the knight. He grabbed him sharply with his hand in the face and began to strike hard. It was magic power along with anger. Jacob couldn't calm down, and he kept hitting his opponents until he got tired and fell off his feet. He was lying on the hot floor with only lava around him. The guy was very exhausted. His strength was running out. Suddenly the guy saw an unusual magical object on his victim. He scrutinized the knight in an instant and revived. After a while, the knight came to his senses and started to continue his fight. He got to his feet and raised his sword. He was ready to destroy the guy. Jacob was not afraid at all. He was ready for this fight, because he had already laid down and gained strength. The knight also fully recovered and became huge right in front of the guy. It was another hard fight, at least the knight thought so. The guy landed incredible strong blows instantly fast, and then just celebrated his victory. The knight was already destroyed lying on the ground. But our hero decides to finish him off with his foot, but the guy just forgot that the knight is made of iron and felt the pain. The guy's leg was very sore and the knight even got up with his last strength to look at him. But the guy was very angry with him, and he continued to strike hard with his last strength, leaving no chance for the Iron Man. After the victory, our protagonist stood and looked at the knight being destroyed for a while, and then he realized that he had won, and began to celebrate his victory further. Suddenly he heard noises, and then he saw small green paws. A second later he was teleported to another world. He could already feel his body getting cold. Turns out it was his little goblin that he tied up. He was really mad at the guy, and then Jacob came to his senses. Of course Jacob was very displeased at first, but then he was pleased with his little friend. He smiled at him, and together they walked toward each other. And then at one point, the guy just started bullying the little goblin. He kept pissing him off on purpose, and the goblin would catch the provocation. The boy thought for a while about what he should do next, and then he started remembering old facts about the little goblin. The little goblin pretended he didn't understand anything at all. When the guy wanted to reach out his hand to the goblin started screaming and behaving inappropriately, which angered the guy, and he started screaming at the little defenseless goblin. Then the little goblin got very upset, and just turned away from the guy so he wouldn't even look at him. He was very sad and pitiful. At one moment the guy started to move forward, then he pulled out the sword that was lying on the floor and started to come closer and closer to the little goblin. With one sharp sword movement, the guy tossed the goblin's magic crystal and then struck a precise blow at it. Just a second later, there was a very large-scale explosion of magic. This incredible magical force was blowing our character away. It was so strong that he covered his face and then could not understand where he was. It's a force that can sweep you off your feet. The little goblin abruptly began to emit incredible powers of magic. There was a magical yellow glow around him. It really amazed the guy. At one point the little goblin felt a little uneasy and the guy noticed it. He also thought that maybe the kid was just bluffing. For the first minute the guy just didn't know how to drive himself, and then he wondered how he should proceed. But the goblin suddenly regained his energy. Jacob was glad that the little goblin was okay, and then he thought about what to do next, so he jumped off his feet and started running. He ran to the fallen knight he had recently defeated. He wanted his trophy. It was the Iron Knight's magic shield. The boy sat right on the floor with the shield and hugged it, and was very happy with it. The little goblin did not like this position at all. He obviously felt something wrong. But suddenly the guy came up with a very interesting idea. He ran jumping and screaming with this magic shield, and then teleportation happened. It was abrupt and unexpected. As a result, our character did not even expect such a sharp teleportation. In an instant he found himself in the house on the couch. The guy immediately began to sharply analyze the situations that have happened to him recently. But he was also very interested in what in this house is interesting, which may be useful to him in the future. The house was as strange as possible. The magical power was felt very strongly, and it was hard not to notice it. The guy walked around the house with caution to protect himself. Then suddenly he finds himself in the kitchen, where he sees a table set up with food, a bun and some water. The guy was very tired after all the fights, so he was very hungry. He already wanted to bite a delicious bun as suddenly a small goblin began to shout at him from behind. Jacob realized that the goblin was hungry too. He held out his bun for him to share and then put his hand right into the little goblin's mouth, laughing at him. Then he decided to take pity on his little friend and gave him a bun. They sat down to eat a snack together, as if in a moment. The little goblin starts screaming violently and behaving inappropriately again, but the guy doesn't react. Jacob is just trying to ignore the little goblin and not pay attention to the fact that he starts screaming once again. After all, the guy is used to the little goblin being very harmful. The guy can't eat in peace. He thinks about what the goblin wants from him. He really thought about what happened to him lately and how he should proceed, but the goblin kept screaming. At one point the guy was very confused as the little goblin became silent. He started to just laugh and cheer. This calmed the guy down, and he continued on with just eating. After filling his stomach with food and finally getting rid of his hunger, he lay on his bed and remembered the moments with his beloved beautiful companion. He closed his eyes a little and remembered all the moments they had had recently. The guy lying on the bed was very sad, because old memories came back with the sadness. He thought about how to fix everything and put everything back in its place, because he did not expect that his life would become so difficult. He wanted his companion to be by his side. The guy remembered what this person looked like. It was a beautiful, pretty girl who had incredible magical powers. She was super strong, super smart, and super enchanted girl. And now it's time to move on. The little goblin and our main character decided to move on in this dark and scary cave, but they had no choice but to move forward. The little goblin as always kept shouting something loudly and being disgruntled, but the guy was used to it, so he didn't pay any attention to him. He just kept on walking forward and moving according to his plan. The path through the cave was very long, very scary, very dark. Jacob was fearless now, realizing that he had super magic powers and a trophy shield and would be safe. All their way the little goblin continued to shout something to the guy, and eventually he got very tired of it, turned around and told him to shut up. But the little goblin did not stop hurting. Of course, the guy realized that the little goblin could be just very scared, because the cave is really dark and unpredictable. They continued walking, and at one point the guy stepped on something incomprehensible. Rather, for all it was a button stone on the floor. At that moment they felt the danger and decided that they had to run away. They ran for as long as they had the strength, and then they abruptly turned as the little goblin was very scared and had a panic attack. They had no more strength, but the fear was overwhelming their emotions, so as soon as they heard some noise they started to run again quickly and sharply. They ran as fast as if an airplane was flying. Meanwhile, the companion of the main character was also in the cave. She thought what to pass this hardest way, but she was confident in her abilities. Move on. Moving on the cave further, the girl remembered the events that happened to her recently, and she became very sad, because she remembered those moments with the guy. She remembered smiling sweetly, laughing, and just catching the euphoria of life. She remembered a lovely romantic dinner with her boyfriend and the way he looked at her. And the girl also recalled the moments when the guy and she loved beer and drank it a lot and often. It was their daily favorite activity. As she continued moving forward and remembering all the beautiful moments, she realized that now she had only a path and no turning back. Holding her magic wand tightly, she moved forward. Unexpectedly for the girl, but her way, was a very huge and scary goblin. He clearly had a very malevolent attitude and wanted to destroy the girl. But the girl turned out to be not a miss at all. She started to use her superpower. In an instant the girl was enveloped by a heavenly incredible superpower. This magical flame was all around the girl. And she started to attack the scary goblin. The strongest hard blows from the girl came straight to the face of the terrifying huge goblin. The girl was very pleased with her actions. She was glad that she was able to fight back the strongest huge goblin easily and simply. Meanwhile, our main character and the little goblin continued to run for a very long time. Because the guy stepped on a button that he didn't notice, a huge big ball of rock started flying at them. The guy sped up as much as possible, because he just wanted to survive. The little pancake climbed on top of him, and with incredible tremendous speed they were running away from the huge ball of rock. The strongest fear overwhelmed our heroes, but they did not give up and continued to run on. The guy's strength is not infinite, but thanks to the strong adrenaline in the blood, he ran as fast and confidently as possible. He ran for some more time, and then collapsed without any strength at all. His legs just refused to go any further. Jacob was incredibly tired. He wasn't wearing his face, his powers were at a minimal level. At that moment, the little goblin used his incredible superpower and dramatically revitalized the guy. He gave him a new breath and strength. The boy didn't expect such an outcome of events, and in general he was in great shock. Then he was happy, thanked the little goblin, and stroked his head. The boy felt a new burst of energy and strength and was ready to move on. With new strength and new energy they kept moving forward. They went step by step to achieve their goal and finally arrive at what they so desire. Continuing to move on, and after a while they saw the end of the tunnel. The guy first got very excited, and then he realized that the front tunnel is completely closed by a huge rock. They walked up to this huge rock and the boy looked at it sadly. But in a moment, a little goblin crouched down by the rock and used his incredible superpower to move it out of the way, opening the way to an incredible world. Jacob was shocked. He couldn't believe his eyes. The boy was so glad that he lifted little Gubkin in his arms and spent the night hugging him hard and glad that they could do it. They were overwhelmed with emotion. Taking a step into this incredible world in front of him, the guy saw an enchanted huge blade sticking out right in the middle of the room. It was glowing with a strong magical power. Without thinking long, he ran over to pick it up. But at one moment, as soon as the guy touched the magic blade, a very scary, huge, monstrous goblin appeared in front of him. It was the boss of the goblins, and he was endowed with the incredible superpower of a magical demon. Jacob was so frightened that he smiled hysterically. The huge monster was determined to destroy him. It was very strong, but Jacob managed to dodge the first blow. The monster would have hit him just a little more. Jacob had only a shield and a sword in his hands, but he didn't have time to pick up the magic item, and it was hard to pick it up because it was right next to the monster. He had to trick it somehow to get the magic weapon. The guy hid his shield behind his back and picked up his sword. He was ready to take the fight. The monster wasn't stupid at all, so he picked up this magical mace and then made another attack. Jacob had to grab his shield, because that was the only way to open the attack. When the guy took the blow, he was thrown a few dozen meters away and fell to the floor. But despite such a powerful blow, his shield withstood it, and the guy remained unharmed and was able to get up on his own quite quickly. The only thing that hurt was his arm because it had taken the brunt of the blow. The guy couldn't defend forever. It was urgent to attack back and come up with such a tactic. The monster continued to attack while the guy was thinking about the right thing to do. Well, this time he tried to take the guy not only by force but also by using secret magic techniques, which were open thanks to the mace. The monster managed to freeze the guy. He couldn't move at all. The monster had to hit the vulnerable target with precision, and that's what the monster did. Jacob managed to put up his shield, which took the brunt of the blow and saved him again. But because he was frozen, his strength was much less, and he flew off again for a long distance, and this time it was more painful. The guy fell on his back, and it was hard for him to get up. Since Jacob's shield is unusual, he could use instant second-level healing to restore it. This guy took advantage of it. Now he was back and ready to take the fight. Suddenly, a little goblin assistant named William came running onto the battlefield. He was very worried about the guy and asked him to be very careful or to finish the fight. Jacob didn't like these tears and decided to send the goblin away. In fact, the guy was distracted from the fight for nothing, because his opponent was very serious and was just waiting for him to strike again. He attacked just at that moment. Jacob managed to dodge it without even using his shield. The guy's morale was very high. He began to shout about how much he hated the monster and promised to tear him to pieces. Even by the expression on the guy's face, you could tell that he was telling the truth. The monster didn't take these words seriously and just smiled. But the last one to laugh is the one who laughs. It was as if Jacob had finally come up with a plan that would give him the upper hand. He waited for the monster to attack again. The attack was not long in coming. This time, the guy skillfully jumped back and didn't suffer any injuries. Thanks to the fact that he was able to land on his feet, he was able to make quick counterattacks and strike with his sword, his first successful attack. This made the monster extremely angry, and he started screaming and advancing very sharply. When Jacob saw its face, he made the important decision to make a tactical retreat. He even managed to talk to William while he was running. The monster seemed to want to freeze the boy again, but Jacob was ready for that scenario. When he ran into the dead end, he pulled out his shield and prepared to take another blow. Just before the blow, the guy jumps into the air, then pushes off the magical object and jumps even higher. At first, the monster can't even realize where the guy went. In flight, he pulls out his sword and thrusts it right into the monster. The monster fell down, unable to move. Red liquid was forming around him, and the magic mace was lying on the floor next to him. When William saw that Jacob had won, he ran to him, happy that his friend was not hurt. He also said that it was a crazy fight, and it looked very exciting from the outside. Jacob was very happy to hear that, because it's great to be admired. Then Jacob decided to take the mace. It was a very important find. With this object it would be much easier to survive. It gave him incredible strength. It made him very happy. William was not less happy for his friend, but now he also got an ordinary sword, because he didn't need it anymore. The sword was too heavy for him to use, but it seemed that William would be more useful without it. On the way, the guys meet 4 more monsters. They were ordinary, the kind Jacob destroys without any problems. It was the perfect opportunity to test his new weapon. These monsters were very aggressive, but they didn't realize what kind of strength they were up against yet. The guy immediately activated the magic power of the mace. With just one swing, he managed to destroy 2 monsters. The other 2 were frightened, but life teaches them nothing, and they wanted to keep fighting, probably to avenge their friends. Jacob couldn't stand the insolence, and angrily destroyed 2 more monsters in less than a few seconds. You could say the test went just fine, the new weapon worked well. William wasn't even surprised, and Jacob was very impressed. The 2 boys got together and went about their business, because they couldn't stay in one place for long. He smiled at his friend Vera, who also had a magic tool, but she would be happy to see how strong Jacob had become, and he missed her very much, doing everything he could to meet her as soon as possible. Meanwhile, the guys came to a locked door. It was probably another boss room that needed to be opened. The guys had to get ready, because any minute now they would be moving inside. There were quite a few monsters waiting for them inside, all of them ready to defend their king at any moment. As soon as the boys appeared, they were the center of attention, all of them wondering what they would do next. The guys discussed the plan of action and how to act in case something went wrong. Then the guy took his shield in his hands and was ready to go into battle. Suddenly something happened that no one could have imagined. One of the monsters attacked his lord. In the end he took his life. The guys were in shock and couldn't understand what was going on, why the monsters themselves destroyed their lord. As it turned out, these monsters knew how Selenium Jacob and what happened to their brothers, so they realized that the opposition is useless and decided to just give way to the guy and even help him if he wants it. Then from behind the throne opened a huge door that was right in the wall. The monsters ducked in front of Jacob and made him a living corridor. For his victory, the guy got a lot of different improvements to his skills and is now even stronger. The guys started to enter, and they couldn't figure out how they were going to walk, because the lava inside was very hot, and they could only walk on the pieces of earth floating in it, which must be very hot too. Because the guys were thinking too long, a timer came on that said that if the guys didn't enter the room, it would close, so they quickly packed up and ran. When the guys went inside, they were moved to a completely different place. There was no lava and the temperature was normal. After looking around, the guys realized that this place was more like some kind of dungeon. They also noticed some strange man, who was standing under the wall and looking at the floor. Jacob wondered who this man was and what he was doing out here all alone, but since he didn't know what he was capable of, he decided to approach with a gun in his hand. The man turned out to be completely inoffensive. As it turned out, William even knew who it was. The man's name was Lieber. Despite all this, the guy didn't hurry to hide his weapon. He didn't trust anyone in this place. As it turned out, Lieber can give Jacob a very important item that will help him pass the running mission. There was not much time left to complete it, so it was necessary to get this item as soon as possible. When the guy tried to talk normally with Lieber, he started smiling. He shouldn't do that at all. It's very strange. The guy was quite alarmed by it. Because of this, bad thoughts began to fly into his head. What if it was just a simple trap that they fell for? Because monsters almost never take the life of their lord on their own. When Jacob felt bad for a second, the rock around him would make him faint. When Lieber saw that the guy wasn't feeling well, he started laughing out loud and thanking him for something. At one point it got so hard for the guy that he couldn't even say a word. He was sweating profusely. But Jacob said right away that he wasn't to be trifled with, no matter what state he was in, and that no one was going to let anyone hurt him. Then William went crazy, forgot who his friend really was, and while the guy was in a very serious condition, took Libera's hand and went somewhere with him. For Jacob, this act was tantamount to betrayal. The guy really wanted William to come to him and help him, but instead he just left with a stranger. Then a huge stone began to fall on the guy, which he barely held back with his whole body, and he cried out that his life might be over now. He was looking at him with a sickly, scary smile, and it felt like he was about to do something bad. Then for this ordeal, Lieber himself offered the guy the magic pendant that he needed so badly, while laughing hard at the same time. Jacob was so exhausted he couldn't even say anything. Lieber put the pendant around the boy's neck, thanked him for his participation, and started to go about his business. He couldn't leave it alone. Even though he was exhausted, he asked Lieber to stop and crawled to his knees to say thank you, because this pendant would solve a lot of problems. As the guy kneeled down, he noticed that Libera had a ring on his hand, though literally not a few minutes ago it wasn't there, where he was able to get such an interesting magical item from here. But it didn't matter now, they had to move on, because there was less and less time left. Lieber sat down in his original place, and the boys crawled on all fours to go about their business. Jacob stood up abruptly and said that the stone Lieber was holding had moved. Jacob heard that the stone had moved, so he decided to stay quiet and listen for more information, to see if it was true. Without thinking long, the boy decided to try to move the rock backwards, which would prove his point. Lieber thought that he was helping him, and said that he would definitely thank him somehow. After these words, the mission ended and the process of teleportation to another place began. The guys never had time to say goodbye to Lieber. They moved into a room where everything was strictly in white colors. The guys were just incredibly happy that they were here. It meant that they had succeeded, the missions had been completed, and they were getting a well-deserved rest. Tons of notifications that they had successfully completed the level, for which Jake had received a lot of rewards, and improvements in his personal abilities. Now the guy was even stronger. Then the guys received an offer, which they had been waiting for a long time. This was the most desired quest, after the fulfillment of which the guy received even more bonuses and promotion on the floors. Then Vera contacted the guy. She was very worried about him and missed him. She didn't want Jacob to agree to a new assignment, it was too dangerous. In any case, the ultimate decision would always be up to the guy. At this point, he considered himself a very lucky man and didn't want to stop at all. Participating in all this is what his life is all about. Then the girl asked how many achievement points the guy had collected. She now had 7,400 and Jacob replied that he had 44,000. The girl was just shocked at such a big number. At the very least, Faith begged the guy to stay in the common room longer, because further tasks would only get harder, and they would require more and more energy, so it was necessary to fully recover, and only then accept a new task and move to the floor above. Jacob sort of agreed to it, and fell onto the bed, and he and Vera agreed to meet on the 6th floor if they could. He and Vera agreed to meet on the 6th floor if they had the chance. The guys had only 1 hour to rest. The system urged him to rest, but he couldn't sleep at all. As soon as he closed his eyes to sleep, he was on the 4th floor in a moment. When Jacob appeared on the floor, he saw a road leading down in front of him, and a road going up behind him, which looked very interesting. Then the name of the quest appeared on the floor, and it sounded like escape, and the time to complete this quest was 2 hours. Initially, the guy didn't understand how to do this quest at all. So something pushed the guy in the back, and he quickly ran downstairs, while thinking about what to do in this quest. So far the guy was just running down. It felt like this road had no end, because Jacob had been running non-stop for almost an hour, and finally after some more time he managed to run to the finish line. The boy was congratulated on his victory, and told that his training on the 4th floor was complete, as well as being told about the new obstacles and traps he might encounter on his way. Then the journey back to William began. He wanted to play with Jacob, but he refused, because he had to get ready for a new outing, so he decided to contact Vera and talk things over. He wanted to play with Jacob, but Jacob refused, so he had to get ready for a new outing. The girl recommended the guy to go to the section of the store, and buy there an item that should help him very well on the 4th floor. The guy did so. Without looking, the guy found what he needed. When Jacob saw how much the item cost, he didn't want to buy it, because it was all his savings, but Vera insisted and told him to use the remaining 3,000 to buy an elixir to improve his body. In the end the guy agreed and bought the items. Now he was the happy owner of 2 very good items, but with no money in his pocket at all. But since Jacob was a very strong player, earning more wouldn't be a problem for him. The girl insisted that he should use the body elixir first, and only then eat the lightning bolt. Without thinking long, the guy started to tear off and try to drink the contents. As soon as the guy took the first sip, he felt very sleepy. His head fell on the table and he could not control himself. After a while the guy started to see himself in a completely different space. He was very worried about how much time had passed at all. The guy tried to call William to him, but he wasn't here. He could hear voices trying to tell him something, trying to understand the essence, but he couldn't do it. Jacob began to try to fight this state, to awaken his strength, to wake himself up somehow. But so far he had no luck. Then he started to wonder how he could wake himself up, what he could do that would affect his body in the real world and make him wake up. He tried to remember all his past battles and past bosses, to somehow trigger his emotions. Then a quest appeared on the screen. You had to get 1 or more enlightenments. There were 5.5 hours to complete this task, which indicated that it was going to be quite difficult. One had to figure out how to complete this quest as soon as possible. The guy decided to think about the tower and tell how much it gave him. He called it his own realization and the meaning of life. After these words, the task was completed and the guy moved back to the room. There was William, who was very happy that the guy had managed to get back again, despite such a hard task. For this assignment, the guy got a boost in his personal skill level. Now he was even stronger and more attentive on the battlefield. After such a journey, the guy was clearly tired, but he told William that he was fine. William offered Jacob a small snack, 2 loaves of bread, one of which he handed over, which he gladly accepted and ate. As he ate, he remembered the good times he used to have with Vera. When they would get together in the evenings and eat good food, he missed it, but he had to make do with what he had. After a delicious lunch, the boys moved to the bed, Jacob deciding to ask the system a couple questions that were bothering him. Jacob told me that there are times in life when a person gets really excited about something and becomes very sure of it. He was one of those people. When he saw a message inviting him to come to the tower and try to climb to the highest floor, the guy relied more on his own intuition than on his desire. Something inside him told him that he should go there. Everything would be fine, and finally the guy signed the contract. The guy only had 2 hours left to complete the new task. Each time he wanted to rest more and more, and no time was being added. Then Faith texted the guy again. For some reason she always wanted to know how many points he'd already earned. Maybe she wanted to recommend something from the store again. But most likely after that incident Jacob wouldn't want to buy anything else based on her recommendations. At this point, the guy already had 15,316 points. A very good result considering that he had only completed a couple of tasks. Vera had never earned so much. Since the guy had money, Vera immediately recommended to buy him leather clothes and a bulletproof vest. This request looked very inoffensive, so the guy gladly agreed and bought himself some nice things. He looked like a better player now. Even William was shocked at his friend's transformation. Jacob and William had already moved to the 6th floor, and the boy was glad his partner had finally gone with him. On the 6th floor the guys were immediately met by Vera, but they were not destined to meet without any problems. Some guy who was on the floor thought William was an enemy goblin and shot him with a bow. Jacob managed to catch the arrow in flight, and no one was hurt. But William was very frightened and started to cry. The boy wasn't going to stop there. He started pulling out a new arrow right away. Jacob looked at him and asked what he was doing, if he couldn't see that he was a peaceful creature. Then Faith got involved in the conflict. She started yelling and asking the guys to stop it. The guy then asked, "Is that your goblin?" Jacob replied that it is not a pet, it is a real person, it belongs to itself, it has no master. Basically it's a friendly sweet goblin that doesn't attack people, but only helps them and protects them. When the archer realized this, immediately apologized for his act and said that it will not happen again. Through anger, the guy forgave him after all, not really wanting to do that much. Then all these people had united into one team, so instead of quarreling, it was better to find out who had what skills to set up a coordinated work. The team consisted of 1 mana, 1 archer and 3 priests, a combination that at first glance didn't seem bad. The main thing was to learn how to work as a team. Since the guys were now on the same team, they had to introduce themselves to each other, at least to know their names. The guys in principle quickly got acquainted. All were very happy to get to know each other, and the team was quite a big difference in years. One of the warriors 45 years old, and the other 19, but this should not interfere with their work together, because each of them will have their own task. After they met, they recognized Jacob. They had heard about him, because he was a very strong warrior. The boys were very happy, because thanks to him they could get to the floor they needed very quickly. As it turned out, the archer, whose name was Noah, was also quite famous and strong warrior. In the first season, he managed to get to the 40th floor, then he was in the first 100 of the best players. Jacob said that the group was very friendly, but not necessarily strong, and that they needed to be prepared to work together, and that they needed to prepare each one separately. Then one girl said that she only wanted William's life because she hated having him around. This made the whole team very angry. How can you say such horrible things towards such a cute creature? The girl said that he didn't trust monsters at all. It seemed to her that this monster could stab him in the back at the most inopportune moment. Faith and Jacob just sent her away, a response she didn't like. But then Faith added that no one was forcing her to go with them, and if she didn't like it, she could turn around and leave. William was such a loyal creature that it was more likely that a man would betray a man in battle than this goblin. Then David came up to them and said that there was no need to quarrel, for we were now on the same team. Everyone should be friends with each other. In the end, the girl realized her mistake and apologized for such an impulsive statement. When Vera is angry, it is better not to touch her at all, but to make her angry is even more terrible. Even when she admits her guilt, she will continue to listen to how bad she is. Jacob suddenly heard something, and he picked up his shield and magic mace, so that he could fight immediately. The girls immediately stopped fighting and tried to figure out what was going on. The guy said that he could feel something bad coming, so he had to get ready. As it happened, some new monsters started coming in, and from the look of them, you could tell they weren't friendly. The boys were very frightened and began to scream, but there was no time for that. They had to pull themselves together and take the fight as soon as possible. The monsters ran toward the boys in a huge crowd, and Jacob and William were ready to be the first to take the fight. Faith adapted quickly and began throwing fire at the enemies, and then ran into the fight ahead of Jacob, a very combative woman. Jacob decided to keep up and immediately activated his magic mace. Then all the other guys joined the battle as well. The main task was not to kill all the monsters, but to get into the place they'd come through. Jacob already knew what he had to do in this situation. He took his mace and smashed it against the ground right in front of the crowd of monsters. Thanks to this powerful blow, the monsters scattered in different directions. This allowed the guys not much to come forward, but the monsters were really a lot. They were coming in infinite numbers, just so pass through them was very difficult. Then the guys managed to run into some building. Everyone was very tired, so they rested for a long time. Because of this situation, David began to worry that the doors they needed to get to might close, and that there shouldn't be any monsters in this location, but for some reason there were. Vera said that the gods had done it on purpose, so that people would realize what awaited them in the future if they went further. Faith was sitting not far from Jacob and David. She knew that David wasn't comfortable in this team. Because he was fighting with the kids, he was like a father to them. Even the guy thought that David would be a better warrior than him, and he said it directly. It was a very nice thing to say. David looked very happy. He literally radiated joy. You could walk up to him and get a good mood. Jacob also told how he was lucky to find this mace on the 5th floor. It should help a lot in the battle. Now it became clear why Jacob rules so much time on the low floors. All people who are just starting out are in a hurry and go to the next floor early. But if you go through all the missions on each floor completely, you can get very good items. Jacob came to the center of the room and said that everyone here was unique, and that they would succeed, but that the main thing was to keep their spirits up and do what they had to do, and then success would come to them. Noah remembered how the sponsorship contract had been advertised to him at the entrance to the tower, and everyone had laughed. Some of them just didn't have enough extreme in their lives. Some of them needed money. Some of them were chasing fame and believed that their lives would improve when they reached it. In general, everyone had their own reasons, some of them stupid, some not so stupid, But all of these people knew exactly how hard it would be inside the tower, so they came here consciously. Then the question came up in the room, whether anyone knows what a sponsorship contract really is, what secrets lie underneath its pleasant offers. It was also interesting to know what the percentages of power mean. If you soar in the system, you can find the answer to these questions, but now it's not the best time to move on. Just as the other players were starting to talk about it, sitting here is fine, but it can't last much longer. Vera was just about to suggest that everyone should move on. Noah suggested to make a plan first, because it never came to it. It's not safe out there now. You can't just go out and hope for a miracle. First make a plan and then follow the plan clearly. David agreed with him, because before they left, they had to know where they were going, and it was a very bad idea to go at random. Faith said that Jacob had foresight, and now he was saying that it was dangerous to stay in one place. Even if there was no plan, he had to move, because I would get them here. David was just in shock from what he heard, a very useful skill. If you know how to use it, then a person becomes almost invincible in battle. So far, the guy saw if the team stay here, soon monsters will attack a very large crowd on this building, and then it will already be impossible to escape. In this case, David asked Jacob, using the skill of ghosting, to see where he should go next in order to meet the least amount of monsters on the way. The guy answered that now it is necessary to move to the station Shamro. There it was necessary to meet some people. Not thinking long, guys began to gather and slowly go towards the exit. All had a very fighting spirit. No one was going to lose. On the street, guys again met monsters that must necessarily destroy in order to go on, and gathered a very large number of while the guys were resting in the building. Everyone was working very well. The archer was shooting from afar, the mages were holding back the monsters, the warriors were fighting, William was healing everyone. At this pace the guys were destroying a lot of monsters. Then the guys start to run and are right on the move, defending their way. When the opportunity arises, team runs into the subway. There they go down to the rails to hide from the monsters. To kill all of them is almost impossible, but to outsmart is easy. So the guys did. Literally, as soon as they went downstairs, over their heads came a very large crowd of monsters. When they all ran, the guys started to move slowly in the other direction, but along the rails, so that they would be harder to spot. In fact, during this short period of time, the guys were very tired. They finally had a chance to rest a bit. During this battle, everyone was good. They worked well. On the way, David began to tell Jacob what kind of books he liked to read, what genres you favorite non-writers. It was certainly very interesting, but in general it is not clear why he emphasizes it so much. The whole now is a little out of it. You need to be very focused. At any moment something could happen. At the end of his story, David asked that if anything happened to him, he save his daughter first, because she was his most precious possession, and she must not be harmed in any way. Jacob agreed to his request, but then he said that if anything happened, he would save all the members of his team. No one would be hurt. When suddenly Vera raised her hand and told everyone to stop, she said there was probably something on the other side. It turned out to be some kind of very strange egg, at least it looked like one. The guys came closer to get a closer look. When they got closer, they noticed a ring, a jar of elixir, and some kind of pendant lying nearby. They were very good magical items that added a lot of power to their owner. Then the team made a very big mistake. They started to argue among themselves who would take the items. The first thing they had to do was to recognize each other's power parameters, and only then to sort out who would take the items. While the first part of the team was sorting out the items, the second part of the team was thinking about what to do with the egg, whether to break it or not. After looking at the system, the guys managed to figure out what kind of egg it was. If you break it, it will automatically start a mission called Hide and Seek. David liked it very much and suggested to start the mission as soon as possible. Jacob wanted to be his right now, but at that moment they were once again snatched away by the zombie Napoli. Now first they had to discolor the zombie, and then already break the egg. Jacob paid attention to the way David fought. He used only his strength, as if he had no skills at all. As planned, the battle was over very quickly. The guys were rested, so they had no trouble dealing with the small crowd of zombies. Jacob asked them how they had refused to be here with such poor skills. They couldn't speak properly because of their shock. Instead of answering the question, one of the men began to tell how they had been attacked by zombies earlier and taken away some of his friends. They also told him where they used to live, and that they had gotten here unwillingly. Jacob told them at once that they were the ones who had found the egg, and that they should mind their own business. The man replied that he didn't mean to touch it in any way, he was just wondering what it was, that's all. Then they asked where Jacob and his team were going, and it turned out they were going to the same place. Jacob was very suspicious of this guy, so he and Vera stepped away from everyone and decided to discuss with her what to do with this guy. The girl was very determined, she said he should be killed right now. Yes, this guy was indeed suspicious, but not to the point of taking his life. This man was a true weakling and a traitor who would frame the rest of them, so Faith wanted to take his life right now, but she probably wouldn't be able to do anything about it. The man had become so friendly with David that he offered to let the team stay at his house if they didn't have a place to sleep. Jacob replied that it would be a good idea, but since he had no place to sleep, they took the man with them and went together. After a while the guys were upstairs, talking about breaking the egg again. Everyone was eager to get started on this secret mission, but they didn't want to pick up the egg because it looked so strange. Faith urged Jacob to break it now. The guy replied that he felt something bad, and realized that it wasn't worth breaking it now. Then Jacob said that it was definitely not worth breaking now. The guys were very upset by this news, but decided to listen. The guy's ability video, he is very good at sensing when there might be something not good. Then he asked William to use a purification spell. The egg reel started to purify little by little. Vera said that if they broke the egg, they could get a very valuable key that they needed after the mission was over. After saying that, Jacob told no one to touch the egg, and went to talk to Vera one-on-one. She told him to perform the task that is already going now needs that key. Disconnect can be obtained after completing the task with the egg. When the completion of less than 20 hours, then on the floor in front of the queen from which you will need to escape, you can be saved in a safe room that opens the same key. It turns out a vicious circle. In any case, you need to beat the egg, no matter how dangerous it was. Another problem is that the egg appears at any time, and in any place, and it is not a fact that it can appear at the most convenient time, so despite all the difficulties, you need to take and do it, because very soon to perform this task may not be possible. Vera could not say for sure whether their team can defeat the queen, most likely that no, because she is very strong, so you need to be sure to protect yourself. Jacob thought about the fact that if he defeated her, he could get a very big reward, and that was important. The girl said that I was right, but the stakes were too high. If he didn't defeat her, she would take the egg and the boys would never get anywhere else, not even if they were lucky enough to survive. As strange as it may sound, this egg probably belongs to the queen. That's why she's hunting it so much. It's bad that the girl thought about it only now. After these words, the guy had a brilliant plan in his head. You can put the egg in a place where the team will be convenient, wait for the queen, and try to take his life. This plan in general Vera liked. To make this plan a reality, Faith must fulfill the most important role since she is a mage, and will be able to attack the queen from afar. Jacob says that he always wanted to be a magician too, but it didn't work out because he's too dumb for it. For now they had to hide somewhere until the queen showed up. If things didn't go according to plan, the guys should use the remaining 24 hours to escape. When Jacob returned to the team, he asked if everyone was ready to keep going. One of the contestants said that the idea of the queen's life, it was too dangerous, so she wanted to stay here safely. Vera told her right away if she didn't want to go she could stay here, it would be better, because if things didn't go according to plan, no one would blame her for dragging anyone into it. In the end, only one contestant stayed behind, everyone else went Jacob. The guys went outside. Faith said that the guy forgot something inside and she was walking now. He wanted to go with her but she insisted on staying here. Then David hugged Jacob and said that women should have their secrets. No need for him to take care of everything. Vera said that she would soon turn around. It was necessary to wait for her just a little bit. It was only a few minutes and the girl returned. At the same time on the screen there was a pressure that the queen appeared on the floor. That meant only one thing, that everything was about to start. The whole team was already on full alert. David was in a great mood with you, but everyone else was very serious. One day the guys were walking down the street. They started to notice people without lives. The last time they passed by there were none of them. It was all the queen's doing.